Welcome to our deep dive.
Oh, great to be here.
Today we're going to be exploring
Okay.
Building a Bridge to the 18th Century.
Yeah.
It's by Neil Postman, and it's really a fascinating look at how ideas from the Enlightenment
Yeah.
can maybe help us navigate some of the
Right.
complexities of the 21st century.
Absolutely. And it's a thought-provoking book. It really challenges
Yeah.
how we think about progress, especially, being so dominated by technology.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us have that idea, right?
Right.
Like, oh, new technology, progress.
Yeah.
But Postman, he encourages us to stop and think
Yeah.
about the full impact.
That's right.
Not just, oh, it's shiny and new.
Yeah, he's not anti-technology,
Yeah.
but he wants us to be more critical.
Yeah.
Like he points out in his book, like a surprisingly large percentage of Americans believe that aliens have landed on Earth.
Now that's interesting. What does that have to do with technology?
Well, he uses it as an example of how we search for meaning. We sometimes latch onto these really easy answers
Mm-hmm.
without actually thinking about it.
Right.
Technology can provide solutions,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't always address the deeper questions
Right.
of purpose and meaning.
So you're saying because we're so used to technology just giving us like quick and convenient answers,
That's right.
we're more susceptible to believing things without questioning them.
It's a possibility, yeah. And, he argues that we sometimes embrace technology just as uncritically as intellectuals embrace things like postmodernism
Right.
in the past, very popular in academic circles,
Mm-hmm.
but doesn't always connect with the real world.
Right. So it makes me wonder if we sometimes just jump on the bandwagon with the latest gadget or app
Exactly.
without thinking about the long-term effects
Yeah.
on our lives or our values or society as a whole.
Yeah, that's exactly the kind of reflection that he wants us to, have.
Yeah.
He wants us to ask, are we truly benefiting from these advancements, or are we just blindly accepting them as progress?
Right. And so how do we become more mindful? I know he uses this really intriguing thought experiment in the book
Yes, he does.
where he imagines Enlightenment thinkers
Yeah,
like Diderot, Voltaire,
Hmm.
being transported to the 21st century.
I love that. Yeah.
And they're observing our world, right? Our
Ah.
technology-saturated world, and
Yeah.
they're offering their wisdom. I think that's where it gets really fascinating.
Right. And just what
Yeah.
they would say.
So what kind of questions would these 18th century minds ask about our relationship with technology?
Well, I think first they'd be very interested in whether a new technology truly solved a significant problem.
Okay.
They'd be very skeptical of things that create the illusion of solving a problem
Huh?
or, that simply cater to our desire for novelty and convenience.
And I know he uses the example of, schools spending millions of dollars on computers
Exactly.
when maybe investing in teacher training
Right.
would be more effective.
They would also, I think, want us to think about unintended consequences.
Oh, okay.
For example, we might celebrate the entertainment value of television, but overlook its potential impact on childhood development.
Or how social media might, connect us in some ways, but also lead to more isolation
That's a great example, yeah.
or comparison, things like that.
And they'd also scrutinize, I think, how technology shifts power dynamics in society.
Oh, okay.
Like who's really benefiting?
Yeah,
Who might be losing out?
right.
And are we even aware of these shifts?
This makes me think about how social media influencers have gained a lot of power
Exactly.
in recent years.
Yeah, the Enlightenment thinkers would be fascinated by that.
Yeah, because that didn't exist before.
Right.
It's a power dynamic that didn't exist.
They might even draw comparisons to, like, Adam Smith's analysis of how industrialization changed labor
Mm-hmm.
and economics, right?
Right.
We need similar frameworks for the information age.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but understanding the broader social and cultural shifts.
Right. And this leads to another important point, I think.
Okay.
Technology shapes how we communicate
Uh-huh.
and how we think.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily change human nature, but it alters our habits of thought
Right.
and interaction.
And he uses the example of Ronald Reagan being called the great communicator.
Yes.
And he suggests that this title was as much a product of television's influence as Reagan's innate abilities.
Yeah, and it's not to diminish his skills at all, but acknowledging that technology shapes how we perceive and value certain traits. Television made that style of communication very effective.
It's almost like technology creates a new stage with its own set of rules
Exactly.
and expectations.
And, as we move further into this digital age, it's essential to remember that technology also influences the meaning of words and concepts.
Oh, okay.
We often take these for granted.
Like what?
Words like truth,
Sen.
law,
Okay.
intelligence,
Right.
fact, and even democracy they take on. New nuances in a world dominated by screens and algorithms.
So we need to be mindful of how those shifts in meaning might affect our understanding of the world.
That's right.
And how we interact with each other. You know what I find fascinating is how Postman draws this contrast between the power of the printed word in the 18th century and just the information overload we experience today.
Right. Like, it's so different.
Yeah, and he talks about Thomas Paine, whose writings were so powerful, they led to his exile.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, could somebody achieve that level of impact through writing today?
It's a good question, right?
Yeah.
Because we're bombarded with so much online.
Yeah.
Even, the most brilliant ideas can get lost in the noise.
It makes it harder for any single piece of writing to have that kind of impact.
That's right. And, the Enlightenment thinkers, they saw language as a crucial tool for reason and progress.
Okay.
They were all about clear communication, like public discourse.
Right.
Not getting lost in academic jargon.
Right.
Or endless streams of information.
And I think there's something about the printed word itself.
Yeah.
It demands a different kind of engagement, right? Like it's a slower, more deliberate way of processing information.
Absolutely.
Maybe it encourages deeper thinking in a way that scrolling through a newsfeed doesn't.
It requires us to slow down, absorb information, and grapple with ideas.
Yeah.
It's much more active.
Yeah, it makes me reflect on my own reading habits, or lack thereof.
Right.
It seems like we've become so accustomed to consuming information in these quick bites and sound bites, but maybe we're losing something.
It's a question I think we all have to ask ourselves.
Yeah.
How has the way we consume information today changed our relationship with knowledge?
That's a good question.
Has it made us more informed or just more overwhelmed?
Right. And it leads us to Postman's distinction, right?
Yes.
Between information, knowledge, and wisdom.
Yeah. He says that information might be abundant today, but it often lacks context and meaning.
And I know he uses the example of a news story about a conflict in Jerusalem.
Yes.
He says, it's one thing to report the event, but unlike other media, he thinks the newspaper has this responsibility to provide the because.
Yes.
So it's not just the what of the event, but the why.
Yeah, the why of it.
Like the historical context, the potential consequences, and why it matters for the reader.
Exactly. A good newspaper should act as a knowledge medium, he says.
So it's about providing that depth and analysis that goes beyond just reporting the surface level facts.
That's right. And that brings us to his concept of wisdom, which he defines as the ability to know what knowledge is relevant to solving significant problems.
That's an interesting definition. So it's not just about accumulating information, but knowing what's valuable and applicable to the challenges we face.
That's right.
Which feels like a really crucial skill in our world today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it really is. And, it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking more information automatically makes us wiser.
Yeah.
He calls this myth information.
Myth information.
This almost religious belief that if we just gather enough data, the answers will magically reveal themselves.
But as we talked about earlier, information without context, it's just noise.
Right.
It's like having all the pieces of a puzzle.
Exactly.
And no idea how they fit together.
And that's where Postman sees a surprisingly important role for the traditional newspaper in this digital age.
Really? You'd think with instant news updates and social media feeds, newspapers would be obsolete.
Right.
Why does he think they're still so important?
Well, unlike those platforms, newspapers have a long history of public trust and accountability. They're not just chasing clicks or going viral. They have a commitment to providing in-depth reporting and analysis.
So they go beyond just telling us what happened and delve into the why behind the events.
Exactly. Postman, he uses the example of a news story about a conflict in Jerusalem. A newspaper shouldn't just report on the violence. It should also explain the historical context, the political motivations, the potential consequences, all the things that help us make sense of the situation.
Like they're providing that missing puzzle piece that helps us see the bigger picture.
Right. A good newspaper should act as a knowledge medium he says, connecting the dots between these isolated events and broader trends.
It makes me think about how often we get caught up in the daily news cycle.
Right.
Just reacting to one headline after another without really understanding the underlying issues.
That's a great point, and I think that's what Postman is getting at. We need to be careful not to mistake information for knowledge.
Okay.
Or knowledge for wisdom.
So how do we cultivate that wisdom in a world that's constantly bombarding us with information? How do we filter out the noise and find those nuggets of knowledge that truly matter?
Well, that's a challenge for sure. And he doesn't offer any easy answers.
Yeah.
But he does encourage us to be more mindful and selective about what we consume.
So it's about asking ourselves, what am I reading? Why am I reading this?
Exactly.
What do I hope to gain from this information?
It's about being intentional.
Yeah.
Less passive.
Yeah.
You know, we have more choices than ever before.
Yeah.
About what we read, watch, and listen to.
Right.
We can curate our own information diets.
Okay.
Seek out sources we trust.
Yeah.
Avoid those that just consistently peddle misinformation.
This makes me think about the importance of media literacy.
Absolutely.
Being able to critically evaluate the information we encounter, discern fact from fiction, credible sources from unreliable ones.
And it's not just about being critical of the information itself, but also being aware of our own biases.
Oh, okay.
And how they might influence our interpretation.
I find that to be one of the biggest challenges.
Yeah.
Recognizing our own preconceived notions and how they're shaping our understanding of the world.
It's something we all have to be mindful of, and it takes practice.
Yeah.
And constant self-reflection.
Yeah. It almost feels like we need to develop like a new set of mental tools.
I think you're right.
To navigate this information landscape effectively.
It's no longer enough to simply be able to read and write.
Right.
You know? We need to be able to think critically, evaluate sources, distinguish between opinion and evidence. Skills that were maybe less crucial in the past when information was less abundant and more carefully curated.
You know, this conversation makes me wonder if there are parallels between the challenges we face today with information overload and challenges that people faced in the past. Were there ever periods in history?
That's a fascinating question.
Where people felt overwhelmed by new ideas and information?
Think about the printing press.
Okay.
And the explosion of printed materials that followed.
Yeah.
That must have been a truly revolutionary and perhaps overwhelming experience for people who were used to information being disseminated primarily through oral traditions or handwritten manuscripts.
So in a way, every technological advancement that increases access to information also creates new challenges for how we process and make sense of that information.
I think that's a very insightful observation.
Yeah.
And it brings us back to why Postman's book is so relevant today.
Okay.
He's not just looking back nostalgically at a simpler time.
Yeah.
He's trying to understand how we can adapt the wisdom of the past to the complexities of the present.
So what does he suggest we can learn from the Enlightenment as we try to navigate this information age?
Well, he points to a number of things.
Okay.
For example, he emphasizes the importance of reason, skepticism, and meaningful discourse values that were at the heart of the Enlightenment project.
It sounds like he's advocating for a more thoughtful and deliberate approach to information, one that prioritizes quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Depth over speed.
Exactly. He's not saying we should reject technology altogether.
Right.
But rather we should use it wisely and thoughtfully.
Yeah.
Always keeping in mind its potential impact on our lives, relationships, and society as a whole.
It's about finding that balance between embracing the possibilities of technology while also being aware of its limitations and potential pitfalls.
And I think one of the most important things we can learn from the Enlightenment is the importance of asking difficult questions, challenging assumptions, and engaging in civil discourse with those who hold different viewpoints.
So it's not just about being critical of the information, but being open to different perspectives.
Exactly.
And willing to engage in thoughtful dialogue.
And that's something that's unfortunately become increasingly rare in our polarized world.
It seems like we've lost the art of disagreeing respectfully.
It really does.
And constructively, listening to understand rather than to respond.
That's a skill we need to rediscover.
Yeah.
We want to have any hope of navigating these complex challenges we face.
And speaking of challenges, one of the most pressing we face today is how to prepare future generations
Right.
for this ever-evolving information landscape.
Right. And, speaking of challenges, one of the pressing ones we face today is how to prepare future generations for this ever-evolving information landscape.
I'm really curious to hear what Postman has to say about education in the 21st century.
Yeah.
What kind of skills and knowledge does he think are essential for young people to thrive in this world?
That's a great question, and it's something that he dedicates a significant portion of his book to.
Okay.
He believes that education needs to go beyond just transmitting information.
Okay.
And focus on cultivating critical thinking,
Okay.
media literacy, and a sense of ethical responsibility.
So, in a sense, he's calling for a paradigm shift.
Right.
In how we approach education.
Exactly.
Moving away from rote memorization and towards a more holistic approach that emphasizes critical thinking and problem solving.
And I think that's a really important point to consider.
Yeah.
As we think about the future of education.
Yeah, it does feel like we're at a turning point, like the old models of education just aren't keeping up. So what does he propose?
Okay, so he starts by highlighting 3 legacies of the Enlightenment that are still relevant to education.
Okay.
The first being child-centered learning, recognizing that children aren't just miniature adults.
Right.
And that they learn differently.
It reminds me of how much emphasis is placed on personalized learning.
Right.
Exactly.
The second being the idea of education as a national resource.
Oh.
Investing in education benefits everyone.
Yeah.
Not just the individual.
It's interesting to think about how that concept has played out.
Yeah.
Throughout history.
Absolutely. And finally, and perhaps most importantly for this conversation, is the importance of a skeptical, reason-based outlook.
Yeah, we touched on this a little bit earlier.
We did.
But really, it's about teaching students to think critically, right?
Exactly. Not just blindly accepting everything they encounter.
It's almost like equipping them with a set of mental filters, right?
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
To navigate this flow of information. And actually, he offers 5 specific suggestions.
Okay, I'd love to hear them.
For cultivating that skeptical mind.
Okay.
That, I think, are really insightful. The first one, teach the art of question asking.
So it's not just learning the right answers, but learning to ask the right questions.
Yeah, empowering students to challenge assumptions, explore different perspectives, to dig deeper into that why behind the what.
Yeah.
He gives this example. Imagine a student in history class asking, whose history is this?
Oh, wow.
It's a simple question.
Yeah.
But it completely changes how we approach the subject.
It makes us realize that history is always told from a certain perspective.
That's right.
And there might be other stories being left out.
Exactly. It encourages us to consider who's telling this story, what their motivations might be. Are there alternative narratives?
It reminds me of how important it is to seek out diverse sources of information.
Yes.
And not just rely on a single narrative.
Absolutely. The second one, teach semantics.
Okay.
The study of language and meaning.
Because words are powerful tools.
They are.
They can inform and inspire, but they can also be used to manipulate.
Exactly.
Mislead.
He wants students to be aware of how word choices can shape our understanding of the world.
Yeah.
How language can be used to subtly influence our thoughts and actions.
Think about how the word terrorism can evoke such strong emotions.
Yeah.
And is often used so differently by different groups. Understanding those nuances is so important.
Exactly. And he wants students to develop a critical awareness of the way language is used.
Right.
Especially in media and political discourse.
So it's about teaching them to see beyond the surface.
Yes.
And decode the messages embedded in language.
That's right. The third one, teach a scientific outlook.
But not just about memorizing scientific facts.
That's right. It's not just about memorizing.
Okay.
It's about the process.
Yeah, the process of scientific inquiry.
Exactly. He emphasizes the importance of observing, questioning, experimenting, constantly testing theories. Understanding that scientific knowledge is always evolving.
And he uses the example of the creationism versus evolution debate.
Such a good example.
And that's such a good illustration of how different interpretations of evidence can lead to such different conclusions.
And it's a great way to teach students about critical thinking and evaluating evidence.
Right.
It also highlights how important it is to be open to revising our beliefs in light of new information.
Which is such a valuable skill in any field, really.
Oh, absolutely. His fourth suggestion, teach technology education.
Okay.
but focus on its broader impact.
So not just teaching kids how to code or use the latest gadgets,
That's
but
right, not just the how-to.
helping them understand how it shapes their lives,
Exactly.
their relationships, society.
It's about developing that critical awareness of the ways technology can be both beneficial and detrimental.
And he points out that a lot of American students are surprisingly ignorant of technology's history.
I know, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
It's like we're so focused on the future of technology that we forget to learn from the past.
Understanding the history of technology can help us make more informed decisions
Right.
about how we develop and use it in the future.
Exactly. And then his fifth suggestion, teach about religious diversity.
Okay, so it's about preparing students for a world where they'll encounter people from all different backgrounds, belief systems.
It's about fostering understanding, tolerance, the ability to engage in respectful dialogue with those who hold different views.
That seems particularly important in our increasingly interconnected, globalized world.
It really is. Now, you might have noticed that he doesn't explicitly mention history.
Oh, that's true. Why is that?
Well, because he sees history as a meta subject. He believes that every subject has a history.
Okay.
And understanding that history is crucial for a deeper understanding of the subject itself.
So it's not just about memorizing dates and events.
No.
But understanding how knowledge has evolved over time.
Right.
How the past shapes the present.
That's right. And I think that's beautifully reflected in his book, which uses the Enlightenment as this lens to examine our own time. It's not about romanticizing the past, but learning from it.
He's not suggesting we just replicate the 18th century.
No.
But we engage with its ideas, its values, that spirit of inquiry, and see what resonates with us today.
Exactly. He challenges us to have a conversation across time to extract those insights that can guide us as we navigate the complexities of the 21st century.
This has been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It has.
It's given me a lot to think about how I approach information, technology, and even education.
Me too. It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in shaping the future, and that the wisdom of the past can offer valuable guidance.
And speaking of wisdom, I love how he ends his book with a quote from Bertrand Russell. "The good life, as I conceive it, is a happy life."
Oh, I love that quote.
And then he poses this question: what conditions are necessary to create a happy life in the 21st century?
It's like he's leaving us with a challenge.
It is.
To reflect on our values, our priorities. How can we create a world that fosters happiness and well-being? He doesn't offer any easy answers. He just urges us to continue exploring, to grapple with these complex questions, and seek out our own paths to a meaningful and fulfilling life.
That's a perfect note to end on. I think we've all gained some really valuable insights. From our deep dive into building a bridge to the 18th century, it's a book that really invites us to think critically. Challenge assumptions. Engage in meaningful conversations about the future we want to create.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep seeking out those nuggets of wisdom that can help us all live better lives.